Welcome, and thank you for attending the MIOSHA virtual event to promote the 2021 National Safety Stand Down to Prevent Falls in Construction. We are recording this to be able to provide guidance to others that may have had a scheduling conflict. Due to coronavirus, we are again hosting this live virtual event and hope to resume in-person events next year. Here today, we have several panelists who will assist with spotlighting the fall hazards encountered in the construction industry. Representing different construction groups across Michigan, let me introduce the individuals that we have.
So we'll have
First, we have Chris Smith, Safety Director of First Companies, representing the Associated Builders and Contractors of Michigan. We have Paul Rosinski, Director of Safety and Health of the Associated General Contractors of Michigan. We have Tracy Alfonsi, Director of Membership Services of the Construction Association of Michigan. Brent Forsberg, President of T.A. Forsberg, Inc., representing the Home Builders Association of Michigan. Greg Brooks, Director of Safety and Compliance of Michigan Infrastructure and Technology Association. John Sexton, Senior Safety Officer with MIOSHA General Industry Safety and Health Division. And then our final panelist is Eric Allen, Safety Manager with MIOSHA's Construction Safety and Health Division. Before we get started, here's a brief agenda for today's event. We'll have an introduction of the 2021 National Safety Stand Down to Prevent Falls in Construction overview. We'll answer some common questions about fall protection. We'll have live question and answers from our audience, and we will ask all attendees to please put your questions in the chat. And then, if time allows, we will also provide some updated information or frequently asked questions relative to COVID-19. And with that, I will introduce Mr. Eric Allen, who will give you the overview of this year's construction fall stand down.
Great, thank you so much, Sherry. The National Safety Stand Down to Prevent Falls in Construction is in its 8th year. This event occurs the first week of May to align the week with Worker Memorial Day, which is April 28th. This annual event strives to bring attention to this worthy subject and tries to prevent falls and the resulting injuries from occurring. This can only be accomplished with your help, so thank you very much for your interest in this topic. Falls continue to be a national problem. Based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics 2019 data, there were 5,333 occupational fatalities across the country in all sectors. Of these fatalities, 1,061 occurred in the construction industry. Fatalities that occurred from falls in the construction industry totaled 401. These incidents are preventable. There are many other instances where an employee fell and sustained an injury. These injuries can cause irreversible damage and diminish the quality of life of the individual. These incidents are preventable. Each employee and employer need to know the hazards associated with the work and take the appropriate actions to prevent these instances from occurring. These falls occur frequently in construction, but can also occur in general industry settings as well. Gravity does not discriminate. In Michigan, 2016 was an especially bad year in terms of falls. MIOSHA investigated 43 fatalities. Nearly half of these were from falls. These falls occurred primarily in the construction industry and in the tree trimming industry. This prompted MIOSHA in 2017 to initiate the Stop Falls, Save Lives campaign. Although we have seen a decrease in the number of fall fatalities since then, plenty of work is still needed. That work happens with all of us working together. We encourage all types of employers to participate in stand-down events. These incidents are preventable. I am saying this for the 3rd time, and I may say it again. The pandemic has really thrown a wrench into almost everything we do, but it has also presented us how we can focus on each individual task. This should be and can be incorporated into scenarios where a worker may be exposed to a fall. The emphasis when it comes to fall protection can be summed up with 3 steps. Plan. Plan ahead to get the job done safely. Provide. Provide the right equipment. Train. Train everyone to use the equipment safely. Please embed these 3 words into your memory. Plan, provide, train. We hope this virtual event is informative. The documents referred to in this event will be linked in the chat. You can also find several resources on the MIOSHA webpage, including standards and free consultative assistance from our non-enforcement division, the Consultative Education and Training Division. CET can be contacted at 517-284-7720. If you are conducting a safety stand down, make sure that you go to the federal OSHA website and receive your certificate. Simply Google OSHA stand down falls and click on Certificate of Participation, where you can enter your data and then print out your certificate. Do your part to spread the word. These incidents are preventable.
Thank you, Eric. Now we will answer some questions that come up frequently, and we will do our best to answer them. Before we start, though, a disclaimer about these topics. These discussions are not intended to be a complete discourse on the topic. Each scenario faced by an employer and or employee is different and needs to be evaluated for legal requirements and work practices that keep an employee free from recognized hazards. Thank you. With that, we will move into the questions, and I will start that out. Our first question will go to Mr. Eric Allen. And Eric, what are the most cited fall protection rules?
Okay, so I pulled a report from the OSHA information system regarding the top 10 rules for fall protection from 2017 until the year end of 2020. So at the top of the list is residential construction. So with this, the rules next to it, but we need to make sure that people are wearing fall protection in residential. There's still some issue out there with some residential people feel that it didn't change, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, but it has changed. Next one is the unprotected sides and edges. So whenever an employer and employee is not protected at 6 feet or above, they need to be protected. Next, number 3, training program. So the employer has to provide a training program for employees so they know how to recognize and how to protect themselves against falls. Next, number 4, roofing work on low slope roofs. So with this, a lot of roofing operations may fall into this category. Those employees need to be protected even though it is a low slope roof. Next, number 5, holes. Now these are the holes that you can trip in or step into. Number 6, roofing work on steep roofs. So that'd be greater than a 412 pitch. There's additional fall protection requiremements in the standard regarding that. Number 7, holes. Now these are the ones where you can actually fall through the hole. So there's specific requirements about that as well. Number 8, training, a certificate of training. So each employer, when they train their employees, they need to provide that certificate of training to their employees. Number 9, wall openings. So with that, whenever there's like a 2x4 wall, you need to make sure that, or a window opening, you need to make sure that the opening is less than what is required in the standard, so that way an employee cannot fall through that. This is going to be especially bad around windows, but then also framed walls where you could be next to a stairwell or where a stairwell may be coming in. And then lastly is the top edge height of guardrails. So remember 42 plus or minus 3.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Our next question is for Mr. Brent Forsberg.
So the question is, what fall protection rules apply to residential construction?
Yeah, well, the short answer is all of them. What's important to understand when we look at it is that as Eric just discussed, all of those rules are in place, and I'm coming from the perspective of a business owner. And what's really important to me is what's the culture that we are putting on site, because people that people are moving around the job site, that we're always under pressure for time and budget and to get things done. And in the end, having safety and having the culture in place and the training will help us become a more sustainable company and also have higher production over time. Because number one, if you just look at the psychology of it, people like to know and work for people where they feel that their well-being is being looked out for. So when we look at it, our job sites, we require all of our subs to submit their safety plan into us. And in that comes any of the use of hand power tools, housekeeping, sanitation, first aid, any protective requirement, including fall protection. And then have it laid out in understanding inside of their documents to us what their commitment is to that. So simple things like knowing how to use scaffolding, and if there's not railing, that it's marked differently so people know they have to tie off, and understanding how to properly tie off on the roof system that's being built or whatever they're working where the fall protection is required. So Eric had given the list in the previous slide of what rules are cited on it. From a residential standpoint, even though it's end usage residential, a lot of it falls under 501B13. But when you look at it from my standpoint, I think the most important thing to realize, if you can build this culture around it, have the safety plans, have your team working on it, it just becomes part of the everyday life of what our job sites are. And at the end of the day, for me, it's important that all of our workers go home in the same condition we got them in the morning. And I think in the long run, that's the important thing to remember when we're going through this, especially as business owners or foremen or anybody that has any sort of leadership position over people on job sites.
Thank you, Brent. Great information. Question number 3 is for Paul Rosinski. What duties must the competent person perform regarding fall protection? What are the requirements for fall protection training, and what is required to teach the course?
Well, thank you, Sherry. So the term competent person is used in many of the occupational safety and health standards, not only by OSHA, but by MIOSHA as well. And it says, by the way of training and or experience, a competent person is knowledgeable of the applicable standards and is identifying the workplace hazards related to the operations that are taking place, and has the authority to correct them and or stop work if necessary. Some standards have additional specification requirements for the competent person, and that is really, competency is demonstrated and not as much certified. So competent persons must be able to recognize the hazards and be able to mitigate them. One work site may have multiple competent people on them, or one person who is competent in multiple areas. Competent persons are not required to have a recognized degree, certificate, or extensive experience. However, a lack of a degree or certification does not mean that a competent person completely forgoes any type of training. Competent persons training classes can be used to allow employees to easily designate their employees into this role, because it is the employer's responsibility to designate a competent person. Competent person is not conferring just by completing the training classes. Employees must be given the authority to take corrective measures, and then for their employer to declare them as the competent person. Even after someone has been given that authority to correct those workplace hazards, they may not qualify to actually design solutions to fix them. Take fall protection, for example. A competent person knows that an employee not tying off to a lifeline is a safety hazard, and he has the authority to stop that work or correct it. They cannot, however, install the lifeline the workers would be tying off to unless they would also be a qualified person, because that is the responsibility of a qualified person. As the fall protection example shows, competent and qualified persons have distinctive roles in the workplace. When a complicated person, or excuse me, a competent person, it would be complicated, ensures the safe use of systems, the qualified person designs or installs the engineered systems. The appointment of a qualified and competent person is the responsibility of every employer. So it is crucial that they understand the roles and when each is needed. By better understanding the key differences and the similarities between the competent and qualified persons, employers can ensure that their workplace is safe and compliant with any OSHA or MIOSHA standards. So a competent person, really by the way the standard designates, says that they have to be trained and qualified in the areas of the nature of the fall hazards with the work that's being done, the correct procedures for erecting, maintaining, disassembling, and inspecting fall protection systems that are used, the use and operation of guardrail systems, personal fall arrest systems, safety net systems, warning lines, safety monitoring, controlled access zones, or other products or productions or processes being used. The role of each employee in a safety and health monitoring system when that system is being used, the limitations on the use of mechanical equipment during roofing work if that is on a low-sloped roof, the correct procedures for handling and storage of equipment and materials, and or the erection of or installation of overhead protections, and how that person's role falls into a safety plan or a fall protection plan for the sites that they're on. A competent person could be a safety monitor for recognizing and warning employees of those fall hazards. They would be responsible for the inspections of personal fall arrest and personal fall arrest systems and components after they've been subject to impact loading, because they need to be removed immediately and then inspected by a competent person before they are put back into service or reuse.
Okay. Wow, that was a lot of good information, Paul. I'm glad we're recording this so people can refer back to it. Question number 4 is for Tracy Alfonsi. When I have employees in fall protection, do I need a rescue plan?
Hi, thanks for that, Sherry. The answer is yes. OSHA recognizes the importance of rescuing employees as quickly as possible. So the standard basically says that employers have to provide prompt rescue of an employee in the event of a fall. That's gone on to be defined by ANSI standard as within 6 minutes of the fall. So if you don't have a plan, if you don't know how you're going to get your employee down, you run the risk of wasting those precious minutes trying to figure that out. So it's important to have a plan in advance. As soon as you know you're going to be using fall protection equipment, you need to start thinking about what would happen if somebody actually fell and the method you would use to get them down from that height. Prolonged exposure, leaving somebody there waiting for rescue, can result in suspension trauma, which can be fatal. So basically the employee's hanging there in the harness and there's no blood circulation. The blood begins to pool in the legs and can cause major issues even after rescue, including blood clots and strokes. So it's important to have a plan in place. It doesn't have to be written down, but there does need to be a way for you to communicate that to the folks on site for when it happens, what next steps will look like. And that can be different from site to site, depending on what equipment might be available. It could be something as simple as utilizing a ladder or an aerial lift that you have on site, or more complex, like a descent system or something engineered in the event that you need to get somebody down from a height. But if you don't already have a plan, again, you waste time trying to figure out how you're going to get that employee down. One of the things I highly recommend is, at a minimum, if your fall protection harnesses don't have a built-in relief step, then you can buy something that would hook to the harness. It would be a separate auxiliary item, so that while somebody is awaiting rescue, they can open up that relief step, and it's basically like a little mini rope ladder that they can put their foot in and push off on, and that helps flex those muscles in the legs and continue that blood flow to keep that employee conscious and reduce the risk of that suspension trauma while they're awaiting rescue. So the bottom line is, if you're putting people in fall protection equipment, then you need to also consider what the consequences are of a fall and how you would get somebody down from a height when that becomes the issue. So the answer is yes.
Okay. Now, Eric, I understand you had some information that you also wanted to add here.
Yeah, just real quick. So there's one extra piece of that, and it's the plan does not have to be in writing. So although it would be a best practice, it does not have to be in writing.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Our next question goes to Chris Smith. I have a project where we are using a safety monitor on a roof. What other responsibilities can that person have?
That's a great question, Sherry. Safety monitors shall not have any other responsibilities that takes their attention off their functions of being a safety monitor. So safety monitors' jobs primarily just to warn employees of the fall hazards and those employees acting in an unsafe manner. So that monitor needs to be clearly identified on the job site. And that monitor cannot engage in any other work activities. We really need to remember is that the safety monitors, the sole necessary, it doesn't really add protection. It doesn't protect the workers from falling. It warns the roofers or people working on the roof of the hazard. So we really need to make sure, falls are the leading cause of fatalities, and it's very critical that everyone plans ahead. We're planning to do the job safely, and we really have a plan moving forward. Because if that monitor leaves to grab something, we need to either put somebody, another competent person, to relieve his duties, or just stop that leading edge work and wait till they come back. So it's very important. If you are using a monitor, you have a plan and you're planning ahead for that.
Fantastic. And I guess there's a little MIOSHA spin here as well. Eric, did you have something else that you'd like to add here?
Just real briefly, with that, making sure that the safety monitor doesn't have any other responsibilities. We unfortunately see this a lot where there's a safety monitor, but they're also performing other functions. That is a sole function of being a safety monitor. So please be aware of that.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, we're going back to Mr. Paul Rosinski. So question 6, I'm installing roofing panels. Do I follow Part 45 or Part 26?
Well, thank you, Sherry. The answer would be, well, I would need to refer back to the scope of the standard and see what is listed in both Part 26 for steel erection and Part 45 for fall protection. Here's just an example that was written in a standard interpretation on this subject. So in the I'm going to just kind of summarize it. A commercial roofing contractor was engaged in a re-roof job. In the course of removing the roofing materials, the contractor discovered that there was some metal roof decking that had deteriorated, and a small section or even a larger section, 6 by 6, had to be replaced. This replacement work is covered under the scope of Part 26. So Subpart R is not intended for new construction only. It also applies to steel erection activities and alteration and repair work. Sections 1926 750 B1 contains a list of the activities that are covered under Subpart R, including installation of metal decking. Since that states that steel erection activities done during repairs are covered by Subpart R, in the reverse of the decking installation process, removal is also covered under 1926 or Subpart R. So typically, you would go to the scope of the standard. In another standard interpretation that even goes a little bit beyond, it talks about metal coping, drain scuppers, and flashing. Is that covered by steel erection standard? So what really is important is looking at what is the work activity and what is it involved with. So all of the related activities for construction of metal roofing, accessories, coping metals, drain scuppers, and flashing are roofing accessories. Therefore, their installation is technically covered under Subpart R if they are installing during and as part of the installation of the structural metal roofing systems. Typically, these materials are installed in conjunction with the installation of the metal decking, whereas in the case, the installation of the metal roofing accessories are covered by Subpart R. In contrast, if they are not installed in conjunction with the metal decking operation, their installation would not be covered under Subpart R. An example of this would be in a complete re-roofing job, all metal roof decking has been removed and replaced. 1 week later, a crew returns to install the flashing and gutters. The installation of the flashing and gutters is not covered by Subpart R at that time, in this example, because it was not done as part of or during the metal decking installation. So again, in this situation, it will require a lot of planning, determining compliance with the requirements of which standard applies, whether it be the fall protection standard or the steel erection standard. And just like the workers have to do it all the time to make sure what is done right, is find out and be aware of which standards do apply. As a best practice, many contractors out there apply the more stringent requirements to ensure that there is no second guessing or need to evaluate. And that's done on a case-by-case basis. Could be job site specific, could be general contractor specific, it could be contractor specific.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Paul. Mr. Brent Forsberg, we're back to you. How often should I replace fall protection equipment?
That is a great question. You know, it's one of those things that's used on a daily basis or used quite a bit, you know, if it's a lot on the job site. So it just incrementally wears over time. So number one is always know the manufacturer specs and how to properly store and what the date is on it for when it should be replaced. But also, as was talked about earlier, having a competent person that's able to inspect that gear periodically, because you know everybody just gets used to every day putting their stuff on, and you just kind of get used to it after a while. So having somebody that's inspecting it, and again having that as part of the culture of safety in your business, is important. So you know, looking at it, you know, you can set up for best practices a database, you know, an Excel spreadsheet's an easy way to do it, of the manufacturer specs, but also when was the last time that it was inspected, and understand that should be done regularly. So that way you know that it's going to fulfill its intended purpose should it actually be needed on a job site, which of course all of us hope it doesn't. MIOSHA also does have a standard of how often it should be inspected, and if it's not involved in a fall, and then looking at it too as far as how to find defective components and when those should be removed from service. So, you know, it's just one of those things, again, as we look at it and we talk about safety as a whole on our job sites, it's just creating that environment that the people that are working with us and for us understand that this is important to us as the owners or as the contractor on the job, because all of us want to have projects that come out positive, you know, and obviously there's the punitive side of the regulations, but, you know, they're there obviously to protect workers, but it's on us to go up and above and beyond that to make sure that we're building that culture. I mean, this stuff has been in place for well over 10 years now, so it's a part of our job sites. And I mean, I remember when I was a kid and going to job sites and people, you know, making fun of the safety procedures on the job sites. Oh, this is just a waste of time. You know, it's just more regulation on top of us. But it's here for a reason, and you know, we can build a positive out of it and just remind people that it's here to get you home safely, back to your families, back to doing the activities and being able to have a job site that at the end everybody's proud of, and there's not that black mark on it that something happened. And so, you know, just having those things in place, checking it regularly, keeping it on a spreadsheet is simple, and having somebody that's able to inspect it, because as we get caught up in the day-to-day minutia, it's just one of those things that can go to the wayside.
Thank you, Brent. Preacher Brent. Okay, we're going to go on to Eric Allen. And Eric, is Michigan going to adopt the new ANSI MUP standard?
Thanks, Sherry. So MIOSHA receives this phone call frequently, and people generally ask, hey, do I need to have a spotter, or is MIOSHA enforcing the new ANSI standards? So with that being said, a new term, if you're not familiar with it yet, is MOOP, and that's Mobile Elevator Work Platform. So you may hear that coming up, but OSHA and MIOSHA, we neither have adopted the newest ANSI standards, and we're not requiring a spotter for a person in an aerial lift or a MOOP. We are enforcing the current rules found in Part 32, or in federal language, it's Subpart L, scaffolds. Federal OSHA put out in January of 2020 a letter, and it says, no, we will have to go through rulemaking for us to start enforcing that. So compliance is voluntary with the new consensus standard. Now, however, there is always a general duty clause. So if there's some things that are in that standard, just like any other ANSI standard, we do have the opportunity to cite under the general duty standard. So that's all. Oh, I apologize. There is one more aspect, then I apologize. The aerial work platform standard, you want to make sure that you're double checking that standard to make sure that you're following all those rules as well. And that's Part 32. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Okay, we're going to move on to Mr. Greg Brooks. Greg, do I have to wear fall protection in aerial work platforms?
Well, thank you, Sherry. It's a great question. It comes up often, and it requires kind of a complex answer, as it depends on several factors. The answer can be found in MIOSHA Part 32 aerial work platforms. That standard specifically indicates that fall protection is required on vehicle-mounted elevating work platforms and boom-supported elevating work platforms. So think of the telephone company type trucks and the Genie and JLG boom type man lifts. These require fall protection. Typically, the tie-off point is just below the control panel or integrated into the handrail system. Scissor lifts, however, they don't always require fall protection, but listen to this entire answer here. These types of equipment work based off the center of gravity being vertical as the person is raised to the proper elevation and work is being performed within the confines of the guardrail system. Second part of this needs to be considered is the age of the piece of equipment. Some of the older style aerial work platforms they didn't have the proper places to tie off. And some of the newer style scissor lifts require tie-offs when on the equipment. The employer is going to need to do the research here is to see what is required to make sure they stay in compliance. And the third part of this is, what does the manufacturer say? Each piece of equipment is different. You need to see what the manufacturer specifically says regarding the piece of equipment and follow that. Also, MIOSHA Rule 3216 requires the aerial work platform to be operated in accordance with the manufacturer or the owner's operating instructions and safety rules. So hopefully that'll help out, but basically everyone just needs to do the research before putting an employee on an aerial lift.
Thank you, Greg. Now, I know we're doing a lot of talking about, construction sites, and you guys have provided some great information, but, we have Mr. John Sexton with us, who's with our General Industry Safety and Health Division. John, from the standpoint of wearing the fall protection in the aerial work platform, do you have any additional information that you'd like to add to the discussion from a general industry standpoint?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Basically, Greg covered it very thoroughly. Again, I'm with General Industry. Basically, we cover and do inspections on everything except construction, metal shop factories, plastic injection molding, restaurants, car dealerships, you name it. Again, basically everything except construction. Our standpoint is exactly how Greg put it. We expect fall protection to be utilized for the boom lifts, the genies, the JLGs, the lifts that you'd see along the roadways for a telephone and tree trimming facilities, that type of thing. And then a travel restraint to be utilized for your scissor lifts, not necessarily fall protection, fall arrest systems, just travel restraint systems. So that's how General Industry is looking for it. Some of the questions that our safety officers would use during an inspection to figure out what type of fall protection is being utilized is if they would be on the inspection and talking to the employees, and to determine, by talking to them, what is being issued by the employer to the employees, along with training, testing, that type of thing.
Thank you, John. Okay, we're going to go back to Mr. Chris Smith. And Chris, fall protection while working on a scaffold or ladders, what's the rules?
Thanks, Sherry. So for floor and ground supported scaffold, MIOSHA requires the use of a guardrail system or a personal fall arrest system when the scaffold platform is 10 feet or more above the floor or ground. But it all depends on what type of scaffolding system is being used. Some types just need guardrails. Some types you can tie off. They have anchor points in certain locations. But you really need to make sure you have a conversation and discuss this with your safety person prior to doing this, because scaffold, it can be tricky. There's different factors on what you're using and where you're tying off to. So you want to make sure you talk to them, have a plan moving forward. So as of ladders, you're not required to use fall protection when you're using the ladder properly. There are certain types of fixed ladders that do require fall protection, and those are more typically found in your industrial setting. John can probably speak on that after this. But that's really the main point for scaffolding. You really have to make sure, and then site-specific rules might be different. So some contractors require 6 feet, but again, MIOSHA is 10 feet for protection. But the last part of the question, can the general contractor or host employer make me? Yes, they can. If their rules are more stringent than MIOSHA and you've signed the contract, then you must follow the rules. So it's very important before bidding the work that, the office or estimators know the site-specific rules and requirements in the situation that you're possibly going to get into. So it's going to require some added coordination and possibly safety efforts. So is very important when the guys are heading out on site, that it's clear, the site-specific requirements to set them up to be successful.
Thank you. John, did you have any additional information you wanted to add here?
Basically, Chris covered it. The rule would be 10 feet as well for GI, general industry, excuse me. Making sure those sides are constructed when you're above 6 feet. And yeah, that would be the gist of it.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. Mr. Brooks, you're back on deck. Greg, if I'm working on a low slope roof, how far can I be from the edge?
Thanks again, Sherry. It's another good question. Part 45 doesn't specify a specific safe distance from the edge. Roofers are allowed to work on low slope roofs with several options. Other trades, however, do not have the same options that are permitted to roofers. OSHA did come out with a standard interpretation in 2003 to address what trades other than roofers can do. And it says that OSHA considers physical barriers that fail to meet the criteria of a guardrail in this situation to be de minimis a violation, as long as the four following criteria are met. One being a warning line is used 15 feet or more from the edge, and the warning line meets or exceeds all the requirements in Rule 1926.502 F2. I think there's 6 different criteria or requirements there. And then number 3, no work or work-related activity is to take place in the area between the warning line or the edge. And number 4, an employer effectively implements a work rule prohibiting the employees from going beyond the warning line. So to kind of reiterate that, the employer would need to have all 4 of those pieces in place for it to be permitted by OSHA or MIOSHA.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, we are on our last question here of the commonly asked, and that question will go to Miss Tracy Alfonsi. And Tracy, the question is, how do I calculate free fall distances? And it's a 2-part, so here's part B. Do I incorporate the whole system?
Yeah, so we have a little graphic rather, to show you what that looks like, because I think it's tough to visualize unless you see a picture of what you're working with as it relates to the whole system and what really needs to be included in that calculation. So when you're using a personal fall arrest system with the standard 6-foot lanyard, first you have to add that 6-foot lanyard length into your calculation. Then once the lanyard is deployed, the deceleration kicks in, and so your decelerator will open up another 3.5 feet. Beyond that, the harness will actually kind of stretch up on your body, and you're going to add about 1 to 2 feet for the harness stretch, or system elongation is the technical term. And then this graph shows a 6-foot worker. So this would say about 5 feet from the D-ring, which is in the middle of the shoulders. For me, I'm only about 5 feet, so it'd be more like a 4-foot distance for me. And then you're going to add on top of that a safety factor of 3 feet. So said differently, if you are less than 18.5 feet from that next lower level, you might not have enough space for your system to engage completely. So it's really important when you're choosing your method of fall protection that you're considering that whole system calculation to make sure that you're choosing the right option. And you might want to select, if you have less than 18.5 feet, you might select something like a retractable, or change the location of your tie-off point so you have less of a free fall distance. So all things to think about when there's going to be an exposure to a fall, what that whole system calculation includes, and making sure that the worker will be safe from making contact with that next lower level.
All right, thank you very much, Tracy. Okay, again, we have reached the end of our kind of more commonly asked questions with regards to falls. At this point, we're going to open it up to some live questions from our attendees, and we ask that if you do have questions for our panelists, that you put them in the chat. I will read those, and we'll have our folks to kind of alternate providing a response to you if you do have a question. So I'll give folks a couple minutes to type some questions in the chat. We don't have any there at this time. I also like to bring attention to our attendees that we did drop some links into the chat of some additional resources that you might want to take advantage of on the subject of falls and construction. So you can take a look there. And I will take another quick look here to see if we've had any questions added. Right now, we do not. I'll take another look here in another couple of minutes, but for now, we're going to move on and provide you with some additional information. We have had our lives significantly impacted by this unseen thing called COVID-19. And we want to provide you with some information that you might find helpful. So we have a few questions that come in pretty commonly related to that. So I'm going to start there, and I'll keep monitoring the chat in case we have some additional fall-specific questions. So our first COVID question is going to go to Mr. Eric Allen. And Eric, the question is, does each contractor on site have to have a COVID plan?
Thank you, Sherry. Yes, each employer is required to have a COVID plan. An employer can use the host employer or the general contractor's plan, but each employer still has to have their own plan. The plan also has to be developed and implemented. It has to be written. It cannot be verbal because most of the time you have different people going to different job sites. So you may be working at one site with the host employer or the general, and you're working under that plan, but what are the other crews doing? They may be at another site. So yes, you have to have your own COVID plan.
Okay. Another question for you, Eric. Does the general contractor have to do daily screenings of subcontractors?
Another good one. So no, but hear me out. In the construction industry, we've seen it happen both ways. Sometimes the GC requires subcontractors to go through the screening developed by the GC. But also sometimes they have their own subcontractors perform their own. So it depends on the site. Either way is acceptable. The rule does indicate, though, that each employer shall conduct a daily screening protocol. The screening is required to be maintained by that employer for 1 year, which requires it to be in writing. If you're doing it verbally, it's going to be difficult to maintain that for 1 year, so it has to be in writing. And that can be done either physically or electronically. We're seeing a lot of people go to online systems where they maybe do something on their phone, and that way it's stored electronically. Another aspect of this too is if the GC is performing the screening, each subcontractor has to have access to those records. So if you were inspected and MIOSHA asked you for those records and they said, we need to see your records for the last year, you would have to be able to get those. MIOSHA will not go to that general contractor and get those for you. So you're going to have some form of working relationship with that contractor, the GC, to obtain those records.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Mr. Sexton, do I have to wear a mask at all construction jobs, even outside?
Yes, ma'am. The short answer is the emergency rule, Rule 7, Print 5 states the employer shall require face coverings to be worn when employees cannot consistently maintain the 6 feet of separation, from other employees or individuals in the workplace, and to consider face shields when employees cannot consistently maintain 3 feet of separation from other individuals in the workplace. So again, if that social distancing is not able to be maintained throughout the work area, face masks need to be worn.
Okay, thank you. And stay on deck there, Mr. John, because we have another one for you. Where can I find COVID best practices?
Basically, there's a lot of information out there. The CDC the website they have is amazing. We have some of our own websites. OSHA has some of theirs, but basically any click around there, michigan.gov /MIOSHA, and we have quite a few COVID-related resources. I see that you put one there on the screen there. The state of Michigan, CDC, OSHA, they're all coming in together and putting this information readily available to the public.
Okay, thank you. All right, and we have one final commonly asked COVID question. Eric, what are the best practices for when I have two workers in one aerial work platform?
Okay. So if you happen to have two employees that need to work side by side in an aerial lift, make sure they've successfully completed their daily screening, they've not reported any feelings of COVID symptoms, and they need to be wearing face coverings and possibly even face shields. As the rule indicates before, consider. It doesn't mandate it, but you do need to make sure that they are wearing face coverings. Most of the time, aerial work platforms, the platform itself is 6 feet or less. There are some really large ones out there, so you'll have to check that part out. But a best case scenario too is to have two people who reside in the same place together. So they live together, they could use the same aerial lift, that would be the best. Or two people who have been fully vaccinated, that would be another good practice. They do need to wear face coverings when employees cannot maintain 6 feet. And like I said before, if you have face shields, that would be also a best practice as well.
Okay, thank you. Well, that brings us close to a close for all of our questions. We still have no additional questions in our chat. With that, I'm going to thank all of our panelists for your insight into our topics, both falls and COVID. Hopefully, this has provided our attendees with some clarity on any number of issues that you may have been faced with or you might be faced with in the future. You've been provided with contact information for MIOSHA. Well, let me provide that to you. So this is a means that you can reach us if you should have additional questions or need additional assistance. This is how you can reach us. And with that, I will turn it back over to Mr. Eric Allen to close out our webinar for today.
All right, well, thank you so much, Sherry, for moderating this, and thank you to all the presenters on this. But this is going to conclude today's virtual meeting. I want to thank you for participating. I hope you found this informative, and I hope that you do your part to drive the number of falls down to 0. If you're attending this, I ask that you do your part and spread the word to your coworkers, other contractors, or any other persons you may know that work construction or in any other industry where they may be exposed to falls. Before we end though today, I want to ask you, what are you going to do with this information? Hopefully you just don't keep it to yourself, and I hope that you tell other people about what you've learned or other safety information you may have that can help improve workplace conditions. Also, if you have a training program, think about it in your workforce. Do you provide materials for languages present at your worksite? If so, great. If not though, think about the lost opportunities to inform your workforce. MIOSHA has been adding Spanish publications to some of their more frequented publications. Also, Federal OSHA has several resources in Spanish, especially surrounding the stand down for falls. So do your part to help the workforce. Again, I want to thank you for your participation to help spread the word about these preventable incidents. Stop falls, save lives. Thank you very much. Take care.
And that will conclude our webinar, and we will end in honorable silence, remembering those who have lost their life on the job. Thank you for your commitment to the safety of Michigan's workforce. In honorable silence, remembering those